December 23rd, 1941. A small coral atoll in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. 16 days after Pearl Harbor, and a pharmacist from Iowa is loading a 5-inch naval gun, while Japanese bombers scream overhead. This shouldn't have happened. Lionel Godfrey had no business being there. He wasn't a soldier. He'd never fired a weapon in combat. Just weeks earlier, he was filling prescriptions and mixing compounds in a quiet drugstore. Now he's one of fewer than 500 defenders, standing between the Imperial Japanese Navy and a strategic island that could change the course of the entire Pacific War. Wake Island. You've probably never heard of it. 3 tiny coral islands, barely 3 square miles total, sitting alone in the vast Pacific. No freshwater source, no native population, nothing but sand, scrub brush, and a few hundred confused men who are about to make history. But here's what makes this story different from every other World War II battle you've heard about. The Japanese had battleships, they had carriers, they had thousands of troops. Let's rewind, because understanding how Lionel Godfrey ended up on Wake Island, that's where this story really begins. It's 1941. America isn't at war yet, but everyone knows it's coming. The Navy is scrambling to fortify its Pacific holdings. Wake Island sits almost exactly between Hawaii and the Philippines, which makes it strategically priceless. A perfect refueling stop, a perfect airbase, a perfect early warning station. So they start building. Contractors, construction workers, engineers. And they need support staff. Someone to run the tiny medical clinic they're setting up. Someone who knows medicine but isn't necessarily military. Enter Lionel Godfrey, 29 years old, pharmacist from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He signs a civilian contract with the Navy. Good pay, adventure in the Pacific. He'll run the pharmacy, help with basic medical care, and be home in a year. Simple, right? Except when Godfrey arrives on Wake Island in early 1941. He walks into chaos. The island is swarming with over 1,200 civilian contractors. They're building runways, fortifications, fuel depots, working around the clock because everyone can feel the clock ticking. And the military presence? Just 449 Marines, 12 fighter planes, a handful of naval guns. That's it. Godfrey sets up his pharmacy in a small building near the airstrip. He starts treating construction injuries, handing out aspirin, dealing with heat exhaustion and coral cuts. It's unglamorous work, but he's good at it. Then December 7th happens. Pearl Harbor gets hit. Everyone knows this story, but what you might not know. Wake Island got hit the exact same day, just hours after the Pearl Harbor attack. 36 Japanese bombers appear over Wake. They catch the island completely off guard. 8 of the 12 American fighters are destroyed on the ground. The airstrip is cratered. Buildings are obliterated. And Godfrey's pharmacy? Gone. He's suddenly working out of a makeshift bunker, with dwindling supplies and a growing list of wounded. No more prescriptions to fill. Now it's tourniquets, shrapnel removal, amputations with whatever tools he can find. But here's where it gets interesting. Most civilian contractors on Wake were given a choice after that first bombing raid. A Pan-American Clipper plane was still able to land, and it could evacuate some people. Not everyone, but some. Godfrey could have left, should have left, probably. He was a civilian, a non-combatant. This wasn't his war yet. He stayed. And when someone asked him why, his answer was simple. Who's going to take care of the wounded? That decision, that one moment, it changes everything. Because over the next 16 days, Lionel Godfrey is about to transform from a pharmacist into something else entirely. December 11th, 1941. The Japanese return. But this time, it's not just bombers. It's an invasion force. 3 light cruisers, 6 destroyers, 2 troop transports carrying 450 Japanese Special Naval Landing Forces, their version of Marines. This is supposed to be easy. Wake Island should fall in hours. The American commander, Major James Devereaux, knows they're outgunned, outmanned, outsupplied. But he's got those 5-inch coastal defense guns, and he's got men willing to use them. The Japanese ships approach, confident, expecting minimal resistance. Then the Marines open fire. What happens next is almost unbelievable. The defenders sink 2 Japanese destroyers. They damage a light cruiser. They force the entire invasion fleet to retreat. It's the first time in World War II that shore batteries successfully repulse an amphibious landing. The first time. And suddenly, Wake Island becomes a symbol. American forces are getting hammered everywhere in the Pacific. But these few hundred guys on a tiny coral atoll just made the Japanese Navy turn around. The news spreads. Headlines back home call them heroes. There's even a famous signal, allegedly sent from Wake Island, that says, "Send us more Japs." That signal was probably fabricated by a Navy PR guy in Hawaii. But it doesn't matter. The myth is born. Wake Island is holding. But there's a problem. They're running out of men. Every bombing raid brings more casualties. The daily attacks from Japanese bombers are relentless. Marines are getting killed, wounded, exhausted, and there aren't reinforcements coming. Major Devereaux looks around at who he has left. The civilian contractors? Most of them construction workers, not fighters. But he needs bodies. He needs anyone who can hold a rifle or load a shell. This is when Lionel Godfrey makes his second crucial decision. He volunteers for combat duty. Think about that for a second. He's a pharmacist. He's already working 18-hour days treating casualties in a makeshift hospital that's barely more than a hole in the ground. He has no military training, no combat experience. But he walks up to Devereaux and says he'll fight. They put him on a 5-inch gun crew. These guns are the island's main defense. Massive naval weapons that require a team to operate. Loading, aiming, firing. It's physically brutal work, and they're doing it while bombs are falling around them. Godfrey learns on the job. Between bombing raids, he's treating wounded. During raids, he's loading shells that weigh more than 50 pounds, hour after hour, day after day. The other Marines start calling him Doc. He becomes known for 2 things: his steady hands when removing shrapnel, and his refusal to take cover during attacks. There's a story that circulates among the defenders. During one particularly heavy bombing raid, Godfrey is working on a wounded Marine in an exposed position. Someone yells at him to get down, to take cover. He doesn't even look up, just keeps working, finishes bandaging the wound, then calmly moves the Marine to shelter. "Can't help them if I'm hiding," he supposedly said. This is who Lionel Godfrey becomes. Not a soldier. Not really. Something else. Something improvised. A hybrid. A medic gunner who exists in that strange space between healer and warrior. By December 22nd, the situation is desperate. The island has been under siege for 15 days straight. The Japanese are bombing Wake around the clock now. The American fighters, the few that survived the first attack, they're all gone. Shot down or destroyed, there's no air cover, no way to stop the bombers. Food is running low, water is being rationed, medical supplies are almost gone. Godfrey is performing surgeries with equipment that would make a veterinarian weep, and everyone knows what's coming. The Japanese aren't going to give up. They can't. Wake Island embarrassed them, made them look weak. Now it's personal. They're bringing everything they have. On the night of December 22nd, the defenders spot something on the horizon. Ships. Lots of ships. This isn't like the first invasion attempt. The Japanese learned their lesson. This time they're sending 4 heavy cruisers, 2 aircraft carriers, 2 seaplane tenders, 2 destroyers, 2 patrol boats, and 2 troop transports, over 2,000 troops, against fewer than 500 defenders. The math is simple, brutal, final. Major Devereaux calls his men together. He doesn't sugarcoat it. They're going to be overrun, But they can make the Japanese pay for every inch, make this invasion so costly that it means something. Godfrey is at his gun position. He's exhausted. He hasn't slept more than a few hours in days. His hands are blistered from loading shells. He's got shrapnel scars from near misses. And he loads another shell. December 23rd, 1941. 2:00 a.m., the Japanese land under cover of darkness. They hit the beaches in multiple locations, over 1,000 troops in the first wave. The defenders are spread thin, trying to cover too much coastline with too few men. Godfrey's gun position comes under direct assault. Japanese troops are advancing, close enough that the 5-inch guns, designed for naval targets, are almost useless, too close. The barrels can't depress low enough, so they fight with rifles, hand grenades, whatever they can find. The battle dissolves into chaos, hand-to-hand combat in the darkness. Explosions, shouting in Japanese and English, the smell of cordite and blood. Godfrey is moving between wounded men, trying to stop bleeding, trying to keep people alive, while bullets snap past his head. At some point, he picks up a rifle from a fallen Marine, fires it at advancing Japanese soldiers, then goes back to bandaging wounds. This goes on for hours. The defenders are being pushed back, step by step, position by position. They're fighting brilliantly, making the Japanese pay for every yard. But there's just too many of them. By dawn, the situation is hopeless. The Japanese control the airfield. They've overrun most of the defensive positions. The Marines are down to their last ammunition. At 7:30 a.m., Major Devereaux makes the hardest decision of his life. He surrenders. Wake Island falls. But the cost to Japan, it's staggering. They lose over 820 men killed or wounded. 2 destroyers sunk, multiple ships damaged. They commit massive resources, including 2 fleet carriers that could have been used elsewhere, to take a tiny coral atoll. And those 16 days that Wake Island held? They matter. Those are 16 days that American forces used to regroup after Pearl Harbor. 16 days to move supplies, evacuate personnel, begin organizing a defense in depth. Historians still debate the strategic significance, but there's no question that Wake Island's resistance bought time. But what happens to the defenders? They become prisoners of war, and this is where the story gets darker. The Japanese march them into captivity. 98 civilian contractors, including many who fought alongside the Marines, are kept on Wake Island as slave labor. In October 1943, fearing an American invasion, the Japanese execute all 98 of them, murder them, bury them in a mass grave. Lionel Godfrey isn't among them. He's transported to a POW camp in China, then moved to Japan. He spends the next 3.5 years in captivity, and here's what's remarkable. In the POW camps, he goes back to being a medic, with no supplies, no equipment, nothing. He treats sick prisoners, uses his knowledge of pharmacology to improvise medications from whatever he can scavenge, keeps men alive through disease, starvation, abuse. Other prisoners later testified that Godfrey saved dozens of lives in the camps, maybe more. He did this while enduring the same starvation, same brutality, same disease as everyone else. He just never stopped being who he was. So here's what I keep coming back to. What makes someone like Lionel Godfrey do what he did? He wasn't a soldier. He had no military tradition, no warrior culture upbringing. He was a pharmacist from Iowa. He signed up for a job, a paycheck, a little adventure. And when everything went wrong, when he had every excuse to break down, to hide, to save himself, he didn't. Twice he chose to stay when he could have left. First, when the Clipper could have evacuated him. Second, every single day after that when he could have just stopped fighting. But he didn't, and I don't think it's because he was fearless. The accounts from other defenders describe him as scared, shaking sometimes, human. It's something else. There's a concept in psychology called moral courage. It's different from physical courage. Physical courage is about overcoming fear of physical harm. Moral courage is about acting according to your values, even when it costs you everything. Godfrey saw wounded men who needed help. That was his value system, his identity. He was a healer, and healers don't abandon the sick. So he stayed, and when staying meant he had to fight, he fought. And when fighting ended, he went back to healing. It's this consistency that's so striking. He never pretended to be something he wasn't, never tried to become a warrior or hero in the Hollywood sense. He just kept doing what he knew how to do, help people, regardless of the circumstances. August 1945. The war ends. Lionel Godfrey is liberated from a POW camp in Japan. He's severely malnourished. He's got permanent injuries from his time in captivity. He weighs barely 100 pounds. He returns to the United States, goes back to Iowa. And here's what he does. He goes back to being a pharmacist. No book deals, no speaking tours, no attempts to capitalize on his story. He just goes back to work, opens a pharmacy, serves his community, lives quietly. He rarely talked about Wake Island, rarely mentioned the war. When people asked, he'd give short answers and change the subject. There's an interview with him from the 1960s, one of the few he ever gave. The interviewer asks him if he considers himself a hero. His response, "I was just doing my job, same as everyone else there." That's it. That's all he'd say. He died in 1978, age 66. If you looked up his obituary in the Cedar Rapids newspaper, it's brief. Mentions he was a pharmacist, mentions he served in World War II. Doesn't go into details. Most people in his town probably never knew the full story. So why does Lionel Godfrey's story matter? Because we have this image of heroes. We think they're supposed to be larger than life, fearless, special, different from us. But Godfrey wasn't any of those things. He was ordinary. He was scared. He was doing a job that went catastrophically wrong. And he just kept showing up. That's the lesson here. Heroism isn't about being superhuman. It's about being consistently human, even when circumstances are inhuman. It's about knowing who you are and staying true to that, even when everything is falling apart. Godfrey was a healer, so he healed. When healing required fighting, he fought. When fighting ended, he went back to healing. He adapted to circumstances without losing his core identity. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of us will never face anything like what Godfrey faced. We'll never be bombed, never be invaded, never be taken prisoner, but we'll face smaller versions of the same choice. Moments where we can stay true to who we are, or compromise. Moments where we can help someone, or walk away. Moments where we can do the right thing, or the easy thing. Those moments might not be dramatic, might not make history, but they define us just as surely as Godfrey's 16 days on Wake Island defined him. There's a memorial on Wake Island now, a small one. It lists the names of all the defenders who died there. And there's a plaque for the 98 civilians who were executed. Lionel Godfrey's name isn't on either one, because he survived. He came home. He lived a long, quiet life. But his story is there, woven into every account of the Wake Island defense. In the memories of the men he kept alive, in the testimonies from the POW camps, in that simple, stubborn insistence on being useful, on helping, regardless of the cost. A pharmacist from Iowa, loading naval guns, treating wounded under fire, surviving captivity, going home, going back to work. No fanfare, no glory, just consistency. That's the war Lionel Godfrey fought. Not against the Japanese, though he did that too. Against the chaos. Against the temptation to give up. Against the idea that ordinary people can't do extraordinary things when the moment demands it. He proved they can. He proved it for 16 days in 1941, and for 3.5 years after that, and for 33 more years when he came home. Just a pharmacist doing his job. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.